Nintendo, why are you so compellingly bad at this? After the last video, I started working on videos of games I like, because for all of our sakes, I think the palette cleanser is needed. But then, this happened.
While stage layouts have been kept the same, the visuals have received a major upgrade.
Are you ready for Crash Out number 2? Normally, I would wait until the game's release before doing something like this, but I've already played it. I wasn't expecting to talk about this series again so soon, but here we are. For context, around 6 months ago, I did an hour-and-a-half video essay on the stagnation of the Star Fox series. But as people pointed out in the comments, this was from a relatively unique perspective. Of all of Nintendo's franchises, Star Fox should be the one that appeals to me the most. I love spaceship dogfights. I love arcade rail shooters. I adore the more open style of console flight combat that took hold in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I miss it every day. Hell, if you were to ask me my thoughts on each individual game in the series, you'd usually get variants of, yeah, I like that one. Yet despite that, I am not a Star Fox fan. I am a fan of console and arcade flight combat. Because of this, I end up having a weirdly strained relationship with this series, which I guess is normal even for the fans, but this is a little different. You see, I believe that gaming is at its best when as many different kinds of games coexist as possible. It's like what Iwata said at E3 2003.
We also have needs for other kinds of games, ones that appeal to every kind of gamer and every kind of taste.
The problem is, ever since the 7th generation, these kinds of games dried up. There are indie games that specifically try to emulate Star Fox, but that kind of feeds into something I'll talk about in a bit. Star Fox fans talk about the pains of the hiatuses between games, but outside of the odd fluke here and there, Nintendo is the only major company that reliably puts one of these kinds of games out once in a while. And this has been the case for decades now. So, despite preferring other games in the spaces Star Fox occupies, whenever a new game in the series is announced, I'm always rooting for it. I've done this hoping that it would have a similar effect to Mario Odyssey and how that game revitalized the 3D platformer scene. The problem is that they keep messing it up, so this never happens, and at this point, I'm fed up. In the time I've been rooting for it, we've gotten a remake of Star Fox 64, a reimagining of Star Fox 64, and this new game is just a remake of Star Fox 64, now with Nightmare Fuel. Now normally, I like to build up to these conclusions because believe it or not, I don't make videos to try to make people angry, but for the sake of time, I'll just come out and say it. I don't think Star Fox 64 is that great. I think the general structure of the game is good, the branching level progression is a good idea, I like the cheesy voice acting.
You're not as stupid as you look!
But my issues lie with the level design and execution. Even accepting the game as baby's first rail shooter, the level design and enemy placement is barren. And when this is a genre where you're always moving forward and your means of interaction are to dodge and shoot, this is not a good combo. There are points in the game where, if I'm not going for medals or anything, I'll flat out put the controller on the floor until something actually happens. Fox wins by doing absolutely nothing. I feel this is worth noting because this is the gameplay style that Star Fox is most known for, and out of the games in this series to use it, this handles it the worst of any of them. The Super Nintendo original has better level design that requires more engagement, even on the easy path. Assault has better level design that requires more engagement. Zero has better level design that requires more engagement. It's just too bad that the gimmicks ruin it. Then there's all range mode. In free roam flight, you would think that'd be important to see where you're steering and aiming for the best navigation and precision. Assault sure seems to agree with this assertion, but no. In 64, you aim off-screen, while the game is more interested in showing you the top view of your ship. The catalysts for the branching paths also vary in execution between being organically telegraphed to needing outside information or dumb luck to figure out. Then, if you're playing it on original hardware, you can expect aggressive slowdown on top of that. And I mean that by N64 standards. It says something that until now, This was the only game in the series that wasn't co-developed by another studio. Star Fox 1 and 2, Argonaut Software. Adventures, Rare. Assault, Namco. Command and 64 3D, Q Games. Zero, Platinum. These developers are often better at realizing Star Fox's core gameplay than Nintendo themselves, but are all too often hamstrung by stupid decisions made by Nintendo. This series is only as good as Nintendo will allow other developers to be. The clearest answer to making a new Star Fox game is to take 64's gameplay and structure but populate the levels with good game design without dumb gimmicks getting in the way. But that goes against all of Nintendo's design philosophies.
Can't let you do that, Star Fox.
The broad strokes are there, so there's no need to iterate or improve. We'll just remake it. Again! I see Star Fox fans wanting Nintendo to evolve the series in some way, and that would be wise, but how can they evolve it if they don't understand it? This kind of game is outside Nintendo's wheelhouse. For crying out loud, Star Fox is literally Nintendo trying to be Sega while refusing to hand development to Sega. Seriously, why they've never gone to AM2 to develop a new game is beyond me. If you ask me if there's any game in the series that deserves a faithful remake, it's the first one. The level design is better than 64, but people are deterred by the frame rate. With all the ways to play 64 with a better frame rate than on original hardware, wouldn't it be good to let the original have the same treatment? But no, that means we'd have to credit Argonaut, and 64 has memes! So, okay, this is 64 again. But this is a ground-up remake. Surely that means they can improve the level design and...
Stage layouts have been kept the same. You can look forward to intense aerial combat. Intense aerial combat.
Even putting my thoughts on 64's level design aside, Desert Bus in Space. Not only is it absurd how many times they've remade, re-released, and reimagined this game, but because of that, this is the most widely available game in the series by far. Hell, if you want to play this game on Switch too, you already can! In the wake of this, I've seen people make fun of that Shigeru Miyamoto quote about not wanting to develop new games in a series if they don't have new ideas for them, but we have to delve into this guy's psyche. The last game was justified by the forced asynchronous gyro gimmicks. Otherwise, it was just 64 with better level design. This game has webcam support with a VTuber mode. Yeah, I'm convinced that this is what got the game greenlit. That's how little faith I have at this point. Then there's the art direction. I'll be brief about the character designs because I have little to add. They're ugly. They all have Mr. Burns posture for some reason, and they either give me Sonic movie trailer energy or Craig energy. Yet they can't give this the Sonic movie turnaround treatment because the release is just around the corner. Seriously though, I hope this discourages them from shadow dropping announcements for new games with such short notice, because it makes things really hard for indies and smaller developers. I mean, to be an indie dev is to suffer, but we don't need to add more on top of that. I know they probably made the characters look like this to fit the more realistic environments, but there are ways to make that work while still retaining stylized character designs. That said, seeing a more arcadey flight game with production values this high is really a sight for sore eyes. You really don't see that too much anymore, and unfortunately, there's a reason for that. This brings us to the main reason this remake is filling me with dread. One of the main things that killed off the big console flight game during the shift to the 7th generation is the same thing that killed a lot of genres back then. It's harder to make them long. Not every game can be stretched out to an arbitrary hours per dollar metric. A game rooted in arcade sensibilities isn't going to be as long as a sandbox RPG. It doesn't lend itself to that. So these kinds of games having expensive presentation really stopped being a thing. And the more open, objective-based flight combat games basically died out completely, because not even they were long enough to justify the cost of production. In the 6th generation, you could not only launch a system with shorter, more arcadey games, you can position them as system sellers and stick the landing. By the 7th, you couldn't.
$599 US.
And now this has escalated to the point where indie developers have to panic at the mere possibility of their cheap games that they slaved over for 6 years being beaten just shy of 2 hours because people think it's funny or just to issue a refund under those conditions. People don't get upset if a game is poorly designed anymore or if the gameplay loop doesn't work. They get upset when the feed runs out, because concepts like replayability are incomprehensible or anti-gamer or some shit. One of the main reasons I did my video was to see how the series adapted to these expectations. I think it's pretty clear by now why this series went from multiple paths to a single path, and then when we do the branching paths again, it becomes, oh crap, we need to pad out the runtime. Now, I'm all for the games industry starting to push back against this mindset that they themselves cultivated, but you want to do it without getting people too angry, and you shouldn't do it all at once, especially when there's a cost of living crisis going on. So this remake is $50 digital and $60 physical. Okay, so it's not the full $80, so that's not too bad. How long does it take to reach the end credits in Star Fox 64? We're dead.
Stage layouts have been kept the same.
People threw a fit over a next-gen open-world Mario Kart game being $80. Granted, it was mediocre, but this is going to be eviscerated. Yes, there are longer cutscenes, not to mention more of them, and some side challenges, but you have to account for the player taking the path of least resistance. This is why in games with sub-RPG runtimes, we stopped getting all of that side content. All of that has to go into making the path of least resistance as long as we possibly can. No bonus missions or hidden arcade games, no Chow Garden, no branching paths. So throwing some half-baked extras on the side isn't going to make this any better. Most people are probably not going to care. Ultimately, what you're paying for here is the presentation, which isn't great when people's key takeaway about the presentation is how bad the character designs are. For the record, I am not saying that these stupid expectations are what I want the game to live up to. Hell no. I hate that this kind of thinking has become normalized. To companies, time is money. To gamers now, money is time. And this mentality not only diminishes what kinds of games get made, but often risks ruining the survivors. But with that said, even I think the value proposition here is laughably bad. I believe in trying to sell people on shorter games again. We should normalize focusing on making the moment-to-moment gameplay fun, engaging, and deep, rather than stretching and padding everything out to the point where games stop being fun and start being compulsive busy work to dissociate to while listening to podcasts or video essays. Yes, I'm talking to you. I can see you! But in order to do that, you kinda have to, sell people on what you're offering? Why should players want this over something longer? How is this a substantial experience worth getting? How fleshed out is the gameplay loop? What will leave me coming back for more? That sort of thing. How is this game going to persuade anyone? Because you're not just selling this to nostalgic people in their 30s, curated and contextualized with other games in that era. This is a reboot. This is a new offering existing in the current marketplace. Will this bring in a new generation of fans? Probably not. Not only do I not see this revitalizing the console flight game space, if anything, I think this will make it even harder for games like this to get made going forward. It will be used as an example of why games of genres that don't lend themselves to longer play sessions shouldn't get made anymore, especially with higher production value. It'll be oh god, it's not going to be a Star Fox 26, is it? This is why I am angry. I would love to be proven wrong. I genuinely mean that too, because I hate what this ill-conceived atrocity has the power to do. I hope it doesn't, but with where things are right now, it seems the most likely to me, and frankly, all the hope and optimism I've had towards this series has been spent. All this time, I've been rooting for the series to do well. No more. I am officially fed up. I'm tired of waiting for Nintendo to get out of their own way here. I'm tired of them constantly regurgitating a game that I never thought was that great to begin with. Yes, even back when the N64 was the current platform. I'm tired of the stranglehold this series has over console flight games in general, both in the present and retroactively in the past. Star Fox is not as unique as people think it is. Games like it were being made as early as 1982. Ports of those games were released on the Atari 2600. By the time of Star Fox, we already had a pretty good idea of what a good rail shooter looked like. For crying out loud, Galaxy Force 2 was almost a full decade old by the time Star Fox 64 came out. Then if you want something more evolved than that, well, the alternatives evolved past Star Fox really quickly. There are so many games in this space that weren't just more revolutionary or even better, but by erasing them, you erase what went into Star Fox in the first place. The key advantage Star Fox had was being an impressive game on the Super Nintendo, but without Argonaut and their contracted engineers, they wouldn't have that, and hell, after they cut ties with them, this was felt immediately. Star Fox 64 was not an impressive game for the time, even in comparison to offerings on systems that weren't as capable of handling 3D. Then as far as offerings on the system go, Rogue Squadron would come out just 1 year later and push the N64 past what most people thought was possible. And then with Battle for Naboo, Factor 5 did it again! Star Fox was no longer the impressive flight game on Nintendo systems. By the time of the GameCube, Rogue Squadron basically replaced Star Fox as the premier exclusive flight combat game, even in terms of how Nintendo positioned it. Oh, you don't like Star Fox Adventures being an action RPG and want epic space combat? We have Rogue Leader for that!
Epic space combat.
We'll take care of the guns, Luke.
Hell, the same E3 where Star Fox Assault was reportedly booed at? Rogue Squadron 3 got applause. For the record, I think both games are great and that Assault's reputation upon release was undeserved. That said, as a series, Rogue Squadron is better than Star Fox. I think for people who started gaming on Nintendo consoles after third-party support dried up on the GameCube, all the way through the Wii U era, people have become accustomed to just playing Nintendo games on Nintendo consoles. I love the GameCube, it's my favorite console, but I was there for the drought towards the end of its run, and it wasn't pretty. This was especially bad on the Wii, where outside of the Nintendo-developed games, so much of the library on that thing was literally unplayable garbage. Then on the Wii U, well, there flat out wasn't much else to play on the thing. So this mentality didn't come out of nowhere, but it pains me to see that kind of thinking applied to everything across the board. I mentioned the Iwata quote about the need to release games to appeal to every kind of gamer and every kind of taste. However, let's listen to how he followed that up.
For these, we are turning aggressively to our great third-party partners.
Third-party titles shouldn't be dismissed. They're important too. And the good ones should be remembered, whether or not they have
funny mascot friends.
But because of how bad the third-party offerings on Nintendo platforms got, we're just used to not acknowledging them. I find this genuinely sad. If someone sees a flight game less complicated than a full-blown simulator, it just gets boiled down to, like Star Fox to most people. Not even vehicle sections and platformers are safe.
Whoa, there's a new Star Fox game in 2025? Okay, so this is actually Pac-Man World 2 Repack, and it's only a single level in the game. But it feels like the closest thing we've gotten to a new modern Star Fox game in almost 10 years. Get this, you can even
Do a barrel roll!
Hell yeah!
Hell, when looking up indie games that fill the void of Star Fox, I've seen this kind of game referred to as a Star Fox-like. And no, I'm sorry, but you can't do that. You don't show up at least 11 years late and expect to have the genre named after you. But hey, when you're kept alive through Super Smash Bros., the zenith of Nintendo fanboy ignorance and unfunny memes, anything is possible. If you want to find indie games trying to fill the void Star Fox often leaves, there are plenty. If you want to find something more involved like Rogue Squadron or Crimson Skies, good luck. Trust me, you wouldn't believe some of the trash I've dug through in search of that. And now we've reached the point where this series is literally cannibalizing itself. This isn't called Star Fox 64 Switch 2 or Star Fox 64K. It's just called Star Fox. While yes, Star Fox 64 follows the same general story and stage themes, including a couple of the bosses, it's a reimagining of it. The stage layouts are different. There are more stage types. The level design is worse. The original is a different game, and within the context of the series, people ignore it way too much. They consider 64 a replacement, like the first one is skippable as opposed to being one of the best games in the series by far. Yet now, even Nintendo is overwriting the original with 64. All console and arcade flight games before and after are just reduced to Star Fox 64. All now and forever is Star Fox 64. Is it any wonder why this game has held on to its reputation for so long? It's people's only point of reference. Who cares if there are games better than it? They don't matter. They were developed by other people. And all the sun's light is Nintendo's to keep. You know, there's a cruel irony to the closest thing we have to a proper follow-up to 64. The villain is a parasitic hive mind that assimilates everything it touches. All this time, I thought it was just a cute Star Trek homage, as opposed to being a warning of what its predecessor would become. I'm tired of the stranglehold this series, and 64 in particular, has on console flight combat, its future, and the revisionism of its past. I'm sick of rooting for a company that fundamentally doesn't know what it's doing in this space, especially when what they're putting out has the potential to ruin what little chances this genre has left to take off again. I know people want to see this series branch out and do new things, but do you really think Nintendo is going to do that? If the past 15 years have been any indication, they won't. If the thing that separates this from other flight games is the fact that Nintendo makes it, and they're this bad at handling it, what's even the point anymore? Nintendo fans, play another video game for the love of YouTube! If you liked the video, remember to like, comment, pay my taxes, and subscribe. Look, I can do a barrel too.
I hate you!